Hey, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Dodger fans. I was at the game last night, by the way. Just want to tell you, I was
Well,
there. I was there at the game last night.
Mr. Pujols got a RBI.
He
Yeah,
did.
he got a great hit.
The funny thing was, is that the first time he came up, I don't know if you saw his first at bat, the first
Yeah.
pitch, he tried to knock it out of the park. It was really fun. I mean, he got a good ride on it, but it was literally the the first pitch. He tried to knock it out of the park.
Hey, Jansen tried to do the same thing.
I saw that. He was really trying to ride the ball. And good for him that they gave him a little bit of run protection. Of course, he had to make it close. So
They're just not
You know.
hitting. I mean, now that their pitching is
yeah,
back.
but he's actually, he actually hasn't given up a run since April. But
No, the Dodger pitching is really good now. I mean, the bullpen seemed to right itself, but the hitting still hasn't really come around.
yeah, it is a problem. But
And
look, I mean,
Mookie should not be-
they're out Seager, and they're out
Bellinger.
Bellinger, and they're
And they're
out.
out Mookie really because he's not a clutch hit. Last year he was a clutch hitter. Here when you like Sunday when they needed a hit with the bases loaded, he strikes out and walks away.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely not yet hitting.
He's
like-
not earning his money yet.
No. Though he made a nice catch.
Yeah, he did.
And I was right there. I was on that. I was
So you're right there in center field.
no. The one that he went over the wall.
Oh, okay. I didn't watch him. I
It
watched
was a
about half
foul
the
ball.
game.
It was a foul ball, and he kind of like ran over and almost went over the wall.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I did see that.
So it was pretty amazing watching him too, because he never really he never looked down over to the like he judged where he was, but he did not look the last couple seconds.
No, he didn't. He didn't
Where he
look.
was. I was like, dang.
No, he's a great defender. I
Not
mean,
get
absolutely.
hurt. Could not get hurt. So yeah, it was fun. That was the first time I'd been to a game since the Padres series, which was pretty bad. That's when things started going downhill.
So it was your fault. So your fault. They're going to lose tonight, right?
No, because I'm not there. I'm not there tonight. I won't be there tonight. I'm not going to get it until June. But well, actually, they're not playing at home much until June. Anyways, it's weird. It's a weird
Are
time.
those your regular seats or are you just buying seats?
Well, there are no regular seats right now because they're because they let you you could buy a plan for the first
Right.
2 months. So these are seats that they're not far away from where I'll be sitting when the season starts.
Where do you sit? We sit in 112.
These are lower, but further down right field wall line. So it's section 40. Last night I was in 42, section 42, but it's pretty much the same general area. It's along the right side. But yeah, it was a fun game last night. I mean, obviously not a lot of action, but it's okay.
Bueller pitched great.
He did. Gave up one hit. It was painful because they didn't, they left him in for that last at bat. And I'm like, he's only going to pitch another inning. He was already at like 90 pitches, but
Yeah, I didn't understand why.
it was bases loaded. And I'm like, dang.
Yeah.
And then of course Jansen came up with bases loaded too. So wasn't it? Yeah, I think it was bases loaded.
Yeah. No,
was.
I think it's second and third.
Oh no, I think or maybe, yeah, because I think whatever. They had intentionally walked for Bueller.
Yeah, they didn't Peter, so maybe it was a base load.
Yeah, it was. I think they intentionally walked Peters, which is kind of a joke. But
Now, is Taylor hurt? Is that why he didn't play yesterday? I know he came in late.
Yeah,
for
he's hurt.
defense.
He's hurt. But he's not on the IL.
No, because he played this ninth inning.
And they said he had a sore wrist.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they said. So the Dodger talk for those who joined late, I people. I was at the game last night, so it was.
Ooh.
I took my nephew with me, who's actually plays baseball at West.
Can I be your nephew next time?
What are you talking about?
Where does he play baseball?
At West Ranch. He's he's a sophomore. No, he's not. He's a freshman, but he's on the. I think he's on the JV team. Anyways, he loves baseball, but unfortunately, he's a Mets fan. His father cursed him as a Mets fan, so they're good. They're good once every 30. I think about 30 years. They had their time. 2015 was the last time they lost to the Royals in a
If the Mets were a good team, they would trade DeGrom to the Dodgers.
Yeah.
Never know. Well, look, again, we're talking baseball. The world's on fire, but I will tell you this. It was the weirdest thing. A couple months ago, I told Tracy, it was maybe 2 months ago. I told you, I'm just going to tell you, this is the weirdest thing happened. So obviously we were celebrating Shavuot the last couple of days. So that was nice to have a holiday, but that nobody else remembers. But we did have a little bit of rest Monday, yesterday, whatever. So I was telling my wife a couple months ago, I forget which was the story that broke, but it was something about, the fact that it seems pretty clear that we're being visited by aliens. And I said to her, look, the next time there's a war in the Middle East, I hope maybe by then we'll focus on the fact that we better all figure out how to live together, because it seems like pretty clear that we're being visited by aliens. And sure,
Well, there's 7 of us on here right now.
It's fairly clear would be that pilots are seeing things they don't understand.
Yes.
That way.
But 60 more, I'm going with this. 60 Minutes did a story about it on Sunday.
Right.
And,
And George Norrie does it all the time.
Yeah, I know there's people who've been doing it for years. And again, look, I try to be as scientific about it. But my point when I said it to Tracy a couple months ago is I said, look, the evidence is there's kind of like piling up right now. And people are finally starting to openly talk about it in the government. And so I said, and I think it's probably because there's so much video now and so much footage, it's so much easier to record stuff. I said, we better figure this stuff out, because as we're being distracted by our inability to get along, it could all be over. I mean, we're sitting here, fighting in these kind of intractable situations where no one thinks there's an answer. And of course, it's, look, I mean, it's the old story.
Aliens could get all the way here from whatever. What would they need our planet for?
Yeah, but Rosemary, some of the theories about this are that, well, first of all, some of the stuff, there's a question of whether it's even manned, or if it's alien, if it's alien technology, exactly. Alien technology that was launched by long dead civilizations, because they don't seem to be interacting with us. And so that, that's one of the possibilities. Several astrophysicists.
We don't know if they're really interacting with us.
Well,
Area 51,
the people, there's different theories about it. One, of course, is that they don't really care about us, and they're that's one possibility. The other possibility is that the civilizations that they represent have long ago become extinct. There's the other theory, which is that if they're anything like us, we're doomed. So that's the last one that kind of scares me, which is, of course, scared people for thousands of years, which is that, if we're not alone here, maybe somebody's going to get fed up with us. And it's actually one of the themes that we read about in the Midrash, where it was kind of placed in the realm of angels. Angels don't seem, at least some of the angels don't really seem to be so keen on us. And we read about that with regards to the Torah and the fact that they don't seem to like us. But it's interesting that there's this, and again, it could be just our psychological need to kind of figure out, what we should be scared of, if you will. But this idea that there's an entity or race of beings that are more powerful than us, who really either tolerate us or who may at some point not tolerate us is a very old theme. And again, you can argue that it's just a psychological projection of fear and the unknown. There's also a possibility that there's always been kind of either an understanding of it. People were, we were visited and people didn't know how to explain it other than these were gods. All of these are possibilities, but I will tell you that we really better figure this out, because it seems as though the issues that we're focused on, whether it's, honestly, something that, look, if what triggered this last round of violence in Israel was essentially the eviction of Sheikh Jarrah, which is 6 homes in Sheikh Jarrah, we are really doomed. I mean,
Rabbi, I think it had more to do with cutting the cables on the Ramadan call to prayer.
I look, some people think that really, Rosemary, the real issue was that Israel, the talk of creating a coalition with
That could be too. I just
Islamic
mean, if
Party.
I was thinking about personally things that would,
I understand,
make
but
me
there's always
fight.
triggers, right? There's always triggers.
that would trigger me. If
And the
somebody did that.
triggers and the triggers, Rosemary, are real. And again, pointing to one or pointing to all, but my bigger point is that if we don't figure this stuff out,
You have to
we're
figure
gonna-
out how not to get triggered.
we are going to be destroyed because we are watching the wrong thing. And I gotta tell
Happens
you,
to pilots all the time.
what?
They fixate on the wrong thing.
Yep.
That's the thing
Well,
that
I mean,
pilots.
Going back to a movie,
Hey.
Independence Day,
Yep.
where these beings came and they were going to destroy the earth, everybody got together. So maybe that's what we need.
Yeah, that is the, when I was going to say the old story, that's the Independence Day story.
COVID-19 doesn't seem to have united us.
Not at all.
No, Rosemary, it's going to have to be a much bigger existential threat than illness.
COVID wasn't enough for you.
No, Rosemary,
I think that
Come
cure's
on.
worse than the disease, Rabbi.
Rosemary, the people, people well enough. If it's something that they really think that they can, how can you even say that? There's people, Rosemary, there's people who clearly aren't afraid enough of
What makes you think
pandemic.
they'll be afraid of extraterrestrials if they're not afraid of COVID?
only because if they see us again, it'll be probably too late by the time they start blowing us up. But
Exactly.
and by the way, Rosemary, how do you know COVID-19 wasn't from the extraterrestrials? could have already happened.
Because
That's
intelligent
the
aliens
others. The others.
there are much
that's the
more
others.
efficient viruses like anthrax.
How do you know? And by the way, how do you know the aliens didn't cut the cables? It could be the old Twilight Zone.
Well, man, if we're going
we
to
only
just
have
get
to
controlled by
fear-
aliens,
Well,
that
who
could be
built-
anti-Semitic, so I'm not going
Who,
there.
who built the pyramids?
Yeah,
I mean, they're just so, uniform.
I know. There's things that we
People who
again.
couldn't watch television built to pyramids.
Rosemary thinks we're capable of this now. I don't know that we are, Rosemary, even if we didn't have TV. Anyways, I will.
They didn't have Facebook either.
Yes, I will tell you that we are definitely, all of us are praying for peace. There's a huge need for
That we can agree
a
on.
lot of peace. I am going to stream us up here, but again, I do think it's weird when we read the story of the angels too, that that there is that tolerance of humanity that that the angels seem to have at best a tolerance for us. And
God reminds
just-
me that there's a banner up at I took my dog to daycare yesterday. They had a banner up and it said dogs welcome, people tolerated. So maybe we're only being tolerated because of our dogs.
well, that's the old joke too, that the aliens, if
God
they
is a
see us,
dog.
right, they'll think the dogs are in charge.
Yes.
As I was chasing my dog around yesterday, it was definitely one of those things of really who's in charge here. But yeah, we definitely are praying for peace. Every day I wake up and I hope that this is over, but it hasn't happened yet. So we've got we've got a lot of people on board right now, and we are going to stream and get everybody together. For some reason, it feels like it was like Thursday or Friday already because of the holiday. We had a really nice service, by the way, Sunday night at Beth Shalom. It was nice to have people together to study and to pray together. And I didn't have any dessert, but hopefully.
It was just nice to see people.
Yeah. I will tell you though, our cameras work much better. So our cameras are, it's not a raid, it's not a contest, but our cameras are streaming much better. So and we started those on Saturday at a bar mitzvah, and I'm pleased to tell everybody that it's looking good. So I hope that when we're ready to, and we're planning on June to have services indoors, that we will have streaming ability so that everybody can join us.
What about class, Rabbi?
Classes will be in the sanctuary too, so that we can use the cameras.
You think in June also?
Oh yeah, for sure. We're planning on doing that in June. So again, we'll do it so that the cameras are already there. The big issue is I think I mentioned to you, I want to have the ability to see the people that are not there. And so to bring in the people, to have the projector, we have one more camera that we have to install. Sound needs to be installed, but we could work around it for class. So that's not a problem. We could be ready today if it was. I'd rather have the second camera in too, but we could do without the second camera. But the real thing is the projector and the ability to integrate the people who are with us virtually, to have them feel part of the group. I want to do it in a way that we can see them and we can really try. I mean, I'm hoping it works, folks. I'm hoping a hybrid. I hope people who have been coming to us virtually over the last few months, year, can still be with us. So we started last week the golden calf, and of course this comes right after we get the 10 commandments. We break the 10 commandments, and it's again a reminder of how quickly we go from being righteous and God-fearing and good to just breaking the most basic commandments, the first commandments of not having other gods and having an idol, which we do. Technically, we broke 2 commandments in one moment, because it says, this is the Torah not only says this is an idol, but it also says that this is your God. And what we finished with last week was this discussion back and forth between Moses and God, where Moses basically says to God, so God says, I'm going to destroy the people. And Moses says, no, think about what you've promised them, think about who they are, think about the fact that, they have done good things. They did believe in you. As soon as I came to Egypt and told them that I came to God, well, actually, that's kind of where we're taking off from there. And of course, the Torah itself says that Moses said to God, if you destroy the people, then the Egyptians and everyone else are going to think you're crazy, that you just took people out to kill them, and they're not going to think very highly of you, God. So we're kind of midway through that discussion. So let's see what happens here. Rosemary, would you like to take some reading?
Sure. All these arguments with God did not help Moses. He even had to put up with having the blame for the golden calf laid on his shoulders. Moses, said God, when Israel was still in Egypt, I gave you the commission to lead them out of the land. but not take with you the mixed multitude that wanted to join them. But you, in your clemency and humility, persuaded me to accept the penitent that do penance. And you took with you the mixed multitude. I did as you begged me, although I knew what the consequences would be. And it is now these people, your people, that have seduced Israel to idolatry.
So let's pause right there. So this is a really strange midrash,
Your
which is
kids.
essentially it's what?
It's like the parents saying, your kids trashed the house.
Yeah. But what's weird about this is that the kids
Mhm.
are actually like more like Moses's kids from the previous marriage.
Right.
Because there is not a discussion like this in the Torah. You didn't miss it. But there is this sense that when God, when we're redeemed out of Egypt, it says that there was a mixed multitude of people that came out. Now, we don't really know what constituted a mixed multitude. The interpretations on it, and I think legitimate interpretations, are that these are people that are interfaith families that came out of Egypt and that are either not Israelite by birth, mixed Israelite Egyptian families, but not pure-blooded Israelites. So let's put it this way by saying that this is a fairly
Ethnocentric.
yeah, it's not really great to have a midrash like this to have to try to explain, because it reflects a tendency that we have within Judaism for that type of prejudice. It's not the only place that this exists. There's parts of the Bible itself, especially the book of Ezra, where, you know, Ezra basically tells the Israelite men coming back from Babylonia, you have to give up your wives that are not Israelite, which, like, he says it matter of factly. The people don't like it, but, you know, it's his book and it's his take on it. And he seems to think that that's what they should do. So there is this tendency. There's also a tendency in the Bible to counter that and to fight against that type of ethnocentricity. And again, one of the best examples of it we see is the book of Jonah, that might have been written around the same time as the book of Ezra. Actually, we're not sure when Jonah was written, but if it was, there was a theory that it was written by other Jews who felt, look, Ezra's view on the problems of intermarriage are not the way God wants things, and it's not true to Judaism. So you'll find midrashim that are on both sides of this issue. Just as I would say you find Jews today that are on both sides of this issue. There are people, you know, look, obviously people know where I am on this side. That's one of the main reasons I'm at a Reform synagogue, is that I don't make any excuses for my belief that, you know, and endogamy, you know, marriage only within Jews is something that needs to be championed in Judaism. But again, people look at the statistics and they draw different conclusions from the same statistics. I mean, when the Pew Research that just came out last week, they released the information about the 2020 Pew findings about Jewish community in America, and, you know, there was information in there that allows people to kind of, again, either say the Jewish community in America that's not Orthodox is doomed, and there's other people who said, wow, look, the majority of interfaith families are raising their kids Jewish, or the majority of people that are raising their kids with a religion are raising them Jewish. I think it was about 40%, I think, which is anything higher than like 30 or say 30 or 40% is going to be high, because a lot of people aren't raising their kids in any religion. Let's say 20-30% are not raising their kids in anything. Some people are raising kids in both, and then some kids are being raised Christian, and I say Christian, or the parents' other faith, which is obviously predominantly Christian. But I mean, the statistics were actually that most families, the plurality, the largest section, are raising their kids Jewish. So, again, some people look at it as, yeah, but only 40% of the kids are being raised Jewish. So, it it depends how you look at it. Is the cup half full or is it half empty? But this is an ongoing discussion within the Jewish community, and there's people who still kind of say things like this, which is that the Jewish community is being negatively affected by the mixed multitude, if you will. But it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's literally like, what I would say to that is, well, what happened first? The majority of people leading the Jewish community are not members of the mixed multitude. If the Jewish community makes mistakes right now, it's not because of that, because the vast majority of Jewish leaders, rabbis, organizational, institutional leaders are not interfaith people, for better or worse. That's just not true. So if there's a problem within the Jewish community that can be pointed to today, like using this midrash today, it isn't the mixed multitude that are leading the Jewish community astray in America. And that is the reality of what happens in the Torah. Not one time in the Torah do we have the blame put on the problem in reality on the mixed multitude. It's clearly the people as a whole that are a problem in the Torah. And you have to really have a midrash that can stretch it large enough to allow for this type of interpretation, that it was the mixed multitude, the Erev Rav or the Asaf Suf, the different words that are used for this mixed multitude, that is the problem. But yet you have it here. So, all right. So let's see what these folks do to Moses, or what Moses has to deal with.
Moses now thought it would be useless to try to secure God's forgiveness for Israel and was ready to give up his intercession, when God, who in reality meant to preserve Israel, but only liked to hear Moses pray, now spoke kindly to Moses to let him see that he was not quite inaccessible to his exhortations, saying, "Even in Egypt, I foresaw what this people would do after their deliverance. You foresaw only the receiving of the Torah on Sinai, but I foresaw the worship of the calf as well." With these words, God let Moses perceive that the defection of Israel was no surprise to him, as he had considered it even before the exodus from Egypt. Hence, Moses now gathered new courage to intercede for Israel. He said, "O Lord of the world, Israel has indeed created a rival for you in their idol, that you are angry with them. The calf, I suppose, will build the stars and moon to appear, while you make the sun to rise. You shall send the dew, and he will cause the wind to blow. You shall send down the rain, and he shall bid the plants to grow."
So, keep going. Let's move it up here.
God: "Moses, you are mistaken like them, and know not that the idol is absolutely nothing." "If so," said Moses, "why are you angry with your people for that which is nothing? Besides," he continued, "you said yourself that it was chiefly my people, the mixed multitude, that was to blame for this sin. Why then are you angry with your people? If you are angry with them only because they've not observed the Torah, then let me vouch for the observance of it on the part of my companions, such as Aaron and his sons, Joshua and Caleb, Yair and Machir, as well as many pious men among them, and myself." But God said, "I have vowed that he that sacrifices to any god save to the Lord only, he shall be utterly destroyed, and a vow that is once passed my lips I cannot retract." Moses replied, "O Lord of the world, have you not given us the law of absolution from a vow, whereby power is given to a learned man to absolve anyone from his vows? But every judge who desires to have his decisions accounted valid must subject himself to the law, and you, who have prescribed the law of absolution from vows through a learned man, must subject yourself to this law, and through me be absolved from your vow." Moses thereupon wrapped his robe about him, seated himself, and bade God let him absolve him from his vow, bidding him say, "I repent of the evil that I had determined to bring upon my people." Moses then cried out to him, "You are absolved from your oath and vow."
So I hope everybody just saw what happened in that midrash. right? It's quite theologically amazing that Moses just absolved God of the vow to destroy the people. The idea it's Moses, obviously, but that a human being can help God get out of God's own promise is kind of amazing. It's theologically a huge departure from what you might expect to find, from a religion that, obviously believes that God is in control and that God is somewhat bound by God's own rules, that God can get out of it if a human being could absolve God of this. So what of course happens is that Moses uses God's own words, which is that if someone needs to be absolved from a vow, that the court can essentially do that. And so Moses uses God's own rules to get God out of this promise. And again, the discussion also to point out that Moses says, look, not everybody's bad. And here, by the way, he turns it back on God, which is, aren't you really upset at all the people? And aren't some of the people okay, right? So Aaron's family, which, by the way, Nadav and Avihu end up screwing up not too long from now and end up getting killed. But at this point, hadn't done anything. So it doesn't say his good sons, Itamar and Eleazar. But it also talks about Joshua and Caleb, Yair and Machir, who were from the tribe of Manasseh. Yair was a judge and Machir was one of the other leaders of the tribe of Manasseh. There seems to be this idea that God, not everybody's screwed up. This is kind of the way things are. But the other part that Rosemary just read that I thought was real interesting was it says that God didn't really want to destroy the people. He just wanted to hear Moses argue on their behalf a little bit. He wanted to juice, what is it called? Just pull them around a little bit, just play around with them. I want to hear Moses beg a little bit. So that's what it said. I want to hear Moses pray. I like hearing Moses beg for the people. So it is kind of a very human projection of what God does or what motivates God to do things sometimes, and that God can be absolved from judgment, but also, and that's what we do every year at Yom Kippur, is essentially beg and pray that God does want to hear our prayers, right? So there's kind of this assumption that God actually cares about our prayers, and that God's mind can be changed, can be swayed. And that's what we do every year at Yom Kippur, is we basically say, look, God, if you have a judgment against us, please, give us a chance to do better this year. Give us a chance not to have that laid on us. We know we screw up. We're bound to screw up, but we also have the capability, the potential to do better. So this, in a sense, is kind of like almost Yom Kippur in a nutshell, which is absolve us of our vows, our promises that we also have made that we can't keep, for things that we would like to do, and also for things that we've laid down on ourselves that we can't do, which, by the way, comes up in the Torah portion that we read tomorrow night, Naso, which is about, from Numbers, which is about the laws of the Nazarites, and specifically also about vows that people can't keep. It's an interesting law that tradition, custom that people had of making vows as Nazarites. But again, this theme of not putting ourselves in a situation where essentially we have to do this. So kind of also, I guess you can make the argument God did what was just by threatening to punish us, or deciding to punish us. But then again, Moses intercedes on our behalf. And again, by extension, we're supposed to also, on our own, we're supposed to really kind of do this ourselves too. The work isn't, we can't wait for Moses to do it anymore. So the good news is that, of course, Moses was successful, or God changed his mind, decided not to do it. And now there still is, well, what do we do now? And so this is the Midrash on Moses coming back and now dealing with it, because the interesting thing about the Torah, and it really is in the Torah, is that you have God, or actually, let me just show it to you real quick. You do have God, and you have God and Moses and that argument, that discussion. Again, this is from chapter 32. This is from chapter 32, where it says, Lord spoke to Moses, hurry down, the people you've brought have acted basely, says what they've done. And God says, let my anger blaze forth against them. Moses implores God and saying, don't do it. Let not the Egyptians say you did this. Remember Abraham and Isaac, Jacob. And the Lord renounced his punishment. So that line we read, he had planned to bring upon his people. Now, what's interesting about this, the next line is, thereupon Moses turned and went down the mountain bearing the two tablets of the pact. And then it says, he encounters Joshua, and Joshua, I'm just showing this to you so you remember what happens in the scene. Joshua says, oh, look, it's the people are like crying, there's a war going on. He goes, no, it's not like that. It's that these people have gone nuts. And then Moses comes near the camp and he sees the people. He becomes enraged and he hurled the tablets from his hands and shattered them at the foot of the mountain. Very famous scene there. He took the calf, burned it, ground it to powder, put it in the water, and made the Israelites drink it.
How do you burn gold?
I think probably, it's weird because the word is saref. It's not melt, it's saref, which is burning. And I think people kind of look at it as like they, it's almost that either the calf was like literally blown up or burned up in a way that, again, it just didn't melt. It just kind of like blew up, like utterly destroyed. But again, the gold flakes or whatever he put into the water. I mean, you could melt it and put it into the water, but of course it would kind of just,
It would sink.
yeah, it would recoalesce together and it would just be a lump. But it seems, again, like he literally turns it into gold dust and throws it into the water, and that way it's dissipates and kind of goes around. So
Maybe Aaron was right. It's not ordinary gold.
magic, it's magic gold.
Yeah.
So folks, what's so interesting about this scene is that Moses, after arguing on our behalf, it's not like he changes. It's not like he doesn't have a chance to consider, like, it's not like he changes his mind and then gets mad at the people. What's so amazing about the scene, if you think about it, and it's also very human, it's very realistic, is that even though Moses just argued on our behalf with God, it doesn't mean that he's okay with us, right? So, he's the good parent, if you will, to use that analogy that we're using, but it's not like, he says to the kid, I love you, and you don't be afraid, whatever. No, Moses is also not happy, and his forgiveness doesn't translate into coddling and into being pleasant. He's still using tough love. Let's put it that way. So it's an interesting scene because I think it's really kind of realistic, which is that Moses is still angry. He's not angry. He's not angry as God was. Maybe he's not willing to destroy the people, but he's not happy, and it's not going to be pleasant for them. Let's actually look. I'll just show you a little bit more of the Torah so that you can understand what's going to happen in the Midrash. So he says to Aaron, what did this people do to you to have brought such disgrace? So he almost right away, he says to Aaron, I know this wasn't your idea. And Aaron, of course, says right away, you know, these people are bad. They're just bad. And then we have the scene, we talked about it, where they said, make us a God to lead us for that man Moses, who brought us from the land of Egypt. We do not know what has happened to him. And they said, so I said to them, whoever has gold, take it off. They gave it to me, and I hurled it into the fire, and out came this calf. So there's that version of it that, you know, I didn't do anything. Just I put it in and it came out, and it was magic. And we talked about the Midrash that, you know, it's a remnant from Joseph's coffin, and it's got magical powers. But again, you know, Aaron didn't really have a choice. We already also read the Midrash that they literally killed somebody in front of Aaron, right? They killed Hur right in front of him, as if to say, you're next, and you better get this idol ready for us. So now we have this face-off between the people. And Moses stands in front of the gate of the camp and says, whoever is for the Lord, come here. And all the Levites rallied to him, the Levites, his tribe. He said to them, thus said the Lord, the God of Israel, each of you put a sword on thigh, go back and forth from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay your brother, neighbor, and kin. And the Levites did as Moses had bidden, and some 3,000 of the people fell that day. So there is a bloodletting, if you will. This didn't end, oh, the people are all saved and given another chance, and, you know, everything's good. No, people died. It's just God didn't kill everybody, but 3,000 people still died that day. And it was funny, we were talking, that's not funny, but it was coincidental, funny, whatever. We were just talking about this last week in our class, in our Torah study class, because we were looking at the fact that the Levites are not soldiers. They're the ones that are not counted in the Torah portion that we read last week and this week in Numbers, which is the counting of the people. And the census of the people is to figure out how many people are 20 years and up that can be soldiers. And the Levites are not counted amongst them because it says that they're the priests. They're the people that are taking care of the temple, the Mishkan. So were they capable of being soldiers? I don't know. They killed a lot of people on the day of the golden calf incident. So they are capable of killing people. They're capable. They've got swords. They can get swords. They can have access to swords. But by the book of Numbers, they're not killing people anymore. And what we pointed out too was that the Levites, their ancestor Levi, remember, Shimon and Levi are the ones who go into Shechem and kill everybody after their sister Dinah was either raped or forcibly, maybe with or without consent, right, by Shechem, is taken. Levi is one of the ones that goes on a rampage. So the Levites here go on a little bit of a rampage. These are priests that get pretty bloody, at least on this day. So what does it tell us about the Levites? That they're at least capable of killing people. Whether or not they do it, another story. And again, this leads to the theory, folks, this little scene that's in the Torah, not in the Midrash, in the Torah, leads some people to the assumption that the concept of having the Levites be the priests was a way to keep them from killing people. That maybe if the Levites were not given tribute, which is their Levitical portion, that they might have been willing to kill people. It's a little bit of a stretch, but it's also possibility. Again, in this story, it's the Levites who do the right thing when they're coming out of the land of Egypt and here at Mount Sinai. It's the Levites who stand up and do the right thing. There's again this other theory that it was only the Levites that came out of Egypt, and that this story is more reflective of what the Levites are capable of doing when they're not happy. Anyways, the scene, it does become very well known and is part of the, if you will, the narrative, the I would say it's the not the most remembered part of this story of the golden calf, that the Levites kill 3,000 people, but it is it's pretty frightening if you think about it, because it's not God that goes out and destroys people, it's the Levites. All right, so that's what we read it in the Torah. Now let's look at it in the Midrash, because now you have it fresh in your minds. What happens? What happens here? All right.
When Moses descended from Sinai, he there found his true servant, Joshua, who had awaited him on the slope of the mountain throughout all the 40 days during which Moses stayed in heaven. And together they repaired to the encampment. On approaching it, they heard cries of the people, and Joshua remarked to Moses, "There's a noise of war in the camp." But Moses replied, "Is it possible that you, Joshua, who are one day destined to be the leader of 60 myriads of people, cannot distinguish among the different kinds of dins? This is no cry of Israel conquering, nor of their defeated foe, but their adoration of an idol." When Moses had now come close enough to the camp to see what was going on there, he thought to himself, "How now shall I give to them the tablets and enjoin upon them the prohibition of idolatry, for the very trespassing of which heaven will inflict capital punishment upon them?" Hence, instead of delivering to them the tablets, he tried to turn back, but the 70 elders pursued him and tried to wrest the tablets from Moses. But his strength excelled that of the 70 others, and he kept the tablets in his hands, although these were 70 seah in weight. All at once, however, he saw the writing vanish from the tablets, and at the same time became aware of their enormous weight. For while the celestial writing was upon them, they carried their own weight and did not burden Moses. But with the disappearance of the writing, all this changes. Now, all the more did Moses feel loath to give the tablets without their contents to Israel. And besides, he thought, if God prohibited one idolatrous Israelite from partaking of the Passover feast, how much more would he be angry if I were now to give all the Torah to an idolatrous people? Hence, without consulting God, he broke the tablets. God, however, thanked Moses for breaking the tablets.
So
that's the new one on me. I thought God was mad about it.
So that's a weird, yeah, it's a weird scene, because normally we kind of look at this as Moses losing his temper, which is natural. I mean, it's like God didn't tell him go down and break my tablets. And it seems like, again, that God isn't really 100% happy with Moses breaking them, because he makes him write the next ones himself, essentially. So where does this Midrash even come from that God was okay with this? Any guesses? Anybody want to guess why this isn't an issue, or why you could have a Midrash that God wanted him to do it? Anybody? Nobody? Well, it's because Moses gets in trouble for doing this kind of stuff, right? When Moses strikes a rock after God told him to talk to it, right, and he strikes the rock, he loses his ability to go into the promised land. Now, there's kind of like this background question. We know Moses can lose his temper, but he loses his temper here, and he doesn't get punished. And so that's why we have this midrash that basically says that God must have been okay with it. And even maybe more so that God basically said, I'm okay. And I'm happy you did it. Any thoughts, questions, points about that? Rosemary, it sounded like you were going to reflect on what your take is on this.
I don't know. I always got the impression that it wasn't only striking the rock, but also breaking the tablets. I don't know if that's like another midrash or just something that I read somewhere, but I always thought that breaking the tablets had something to do with his not getting to the promised land also.
No, but why did you think that? I mean, I'm going to get something here because I think I felt that. I mean, I think other people have felt that too. I mean, isn't it because of the other story? I mean, the striking of the rock story. I mean,
yeah,
I know that story.
I know the striking of the rock story, but I think they kind of blurred in my mind. I mean, my first introduction to this was, not the Bible itself, but something like, a Jewish child's Bible stories or something like that.
Yeah.
And maybe in that it was, I got that impression from that, reading that.
Yep. And I think that there, maybe one of the takeaways from it was that maybe that was like, if it wasn't connected, right, then maybe that was the last straw.
Mm-hmm.
that striking the rock, like,
it just showed that he hadn't gotten any better with his temper.
Yeah. And then, so the Moses's repetition of that temper tantrum was the problem. So this is the picture that I grew up with in my bedroom. I'm not joking. I had this picture in my bedroom as a kid. I don't know why, but I did. I don't know if it was like somebody had given it to my parents and I liked it, but Rembrandt's picture of Moses holding the 10 Commandments over his head like that was always kind of, I mean, I had a picture of Kennedy and I had this picture in my room. I think I had a Lincoln picture too, but I had this picture.
I think that book, I know it had pictures, and I don't remember if there was a picture of like that, but there could have been.
So as you can see, Rembrandt, had a good attention to detail. So he has the Hebrew, lo tirtzach, lo. So he's got, this is the second half of the 10 Commandments, right? Half of on one and half of them on the other, which we already read in the Midrash is the way it was. It doesn't really say in the Torah exactly. I mean, there is a description, but it's not like this. As we also read in the Midrash, that was 70 seahs, which would be like 70 times what a normal person could lift. But so he had that detail. But what I was struck by was Moses's face, which wasn't so much anger. I thought was sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And, that capturing that level of, that emotion there. I mean, this is one of the, obviously the reasons why Rembrandt or whoever painted his pictures with him, his school, whatever, his group of disciples that had to paint whatever he told them to paint, whatever it was, they were good. And they were
probably did the faces and the hands himself.
Yes. Well, let's hope he did, but whatever. It's his school, his man, he had a genius to him. And one of the things besides his use of light was also his faces, the way he captured people's emotions. And to me, what was powerful about it wasn't Moses's rage, but Moses's disappointment. And so in this story, in the Midrash, I think you get it better than you get in the Torah, because the Torah just kind of jumps from Moses defending us to Moses losing it with us. And so there's a level to this, which I think, as soon as you're a parent, as soon as you have a chance to not just be angry, but be disappointed in your kids or the people that you're, who look up to you and who you've tried to do a good job of leading. And again, Moses has only been with the people for, leading them for a matter of months by this point. But he's in Egypt with them. So he was in Egypt with them for at least, well, we don't know exactly, but let's say a year. But it's not like this is 40 years later either. Whereas Moses's face might have looked a little different after 40 years. But Moses has to deal with the fact that the people are the people, whoever it was responsible, whether it was Aaron or the group, the dynamic, whatever, at a certain point, it's him too. It's like, what am I going to do? And it's just that look of disappointment where, again, maybe he's disappointed in the people, but is he also disappointed in himself? Is there also this feeling of like personal failure and what can I do? And it's defeat, all of that. So anyways, I don't know what effect that had, that looking at that picture every day as a kid had on me for my early days, but there you have it. A little secret about me. But maybe explains a lot. Maybe explains nothing. I don't know. So
Hard to explain things.
I will say though that growing up, knowing that my Hebrew name was Moses, I had a lot of Moses envy. Not Moses envy, really. It was Moses.
A little pressure.
Yeah, it was pressure. And so that feeling of
Inadequacy, having to
Yeah, I
live
don't
up
know.
to an
Yeah, but
unideal standard.
yes. Thank you, Judith. But no, there is this
Hamlet envy.
this feeling, yes. So Moses has got to deal with the fact that he's defended this people, but that's the thing, is like he just defended the people, but now he's got to deal with it. And so it is that feeling of like, okay, well, you got what you wanted, you saved them, and now you're going to have to deal with this. Because
it's like, you, God forbid this should ever happen, but you have to speak up for your child in front of the judge, and you persuade the judge to let him off, and then you go, oh, when I get you home.
yeah. And it's really, but it's not just I have to punish the child myself, but now what do I do? Because did I do the right thing? And did I, how can I fix this? If God can't fix it, how am I going to fix it? And so there's that real feeling of like Moses's face in Rembrandt's picture, which I understood a little bit when I was a kid, but I understood it a lot better now as a parent, where you're just like, oh, and now what do I do? So this is a critical moment in Moses's leadership, where you could say, as Rosemary said, look, it kind of gets conflated with the striking of the rock, but maybe at this point Moses realizes that this is going to be a lot harder, even harder than I thought, because how do I run interference for the people and at the same time really help them? And it's not, again, it's, the court is a good example for people who've had to deal with that. But it's also just, another parent, school, a principal, whatever, whoever it is that you're defending your kid from. And at the end of the day, if you're really honest about it, you're like, did I do the right thing? And what do I do now? Even though, I protected them, did I really help them? So Moses, of course, is going to turn to, punishment in a second, but I don't know if right now, Moses broke the tablets. And again, did he have permission to do it? So Midrash, at least some of the Midrashim seem to say he did. All right.
Hardly had Moses broken the tablets when the ocean wanted to leave its bed to flood the world. Moses now took the calf which they had made and burnt it in the fire and ground it to powder and strewed it upon the water, saying to the waters, "What would you upon the dry land?" And the waters said, "The world stands only through the observance of the Torah, but Israel has not been faithful to it." Moses thereupon said to the water, "All that have committed idolatry shall be yours. Are you now satisfied with these thousands?" But the waters were not to be appeased by the sinners that Moses cast into them. And the ocean would not retreat to its bed until Moses made the children of Israel drink of it.
So everybody sees why we have the water ritual here, which is that the waters were going to punish us, and so we have this water ritual, and it's connected to this.
The drinking of these waters was one of the forms of capital punishment that he inflicted upon the sinners. When, in answer to Moses' call, "Who is on the Lord's side? Let him come to me," all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him. They who had not taken part in the adoration of the golden calf, Moses appointed these Levites as judges, whose immediate duty it was to inflict the lawful punishment of decapitation upon all those who had been seen by witnesses to be seduced to idolatry after they had been warned not to do so. Moses gave the command as though he had been commissioned to do so by God. This was not actually so, but he did it in order to enable the judges appointed by him to punish all the guilty in the course of one day, which otherwise, owing to the procedure of Jewish jurisprudence, could not well have been possible. Those who, according to the testimony of witnesses, had been seduced to idolatry, but who could not be proven to have been warned beforehand, were not punished by temporal justice. They died of the water that Moses forced them to drink, for this water had upon them the same effect as the curse-bringing water upon the adulterous woman. But those sinners too, against whom no witnesses appeared, did not escape their fate, for upon them God sent a plague to carry them off.
So does everybody see what happens here? This is tied to other forms of punishment that happen to people. And again, what's really, really weird, folks, and I had no idea when we were going to read this, this is this week's Torah portion. Well, part of it, right? Because as I said, we're reading Parshat Naso this week. And Parshat Naso includes the lines of Sotah, the rules of Sotah, which is the ritual for an adulterous woman, right? The ritual of drinking the bitter waters. It just so happens, again, it's this week's Torah portion. So what a woman does someone want to describe this for people who don't know what it is?
So the idea was, as I believe, if the man suspected his wife of adultery, but he couldn't prove it because there were no witnesses, then he had to take her to the priest, and the priest would make her drink this water. And if she was guilty, then she would die. And if she didn't die, then she was proclaimed innocent.
Yeah. Other than the fact she
Right.
doesn't die. She doesn't die. You're on good. You're good with everything except for she doesn't die.
Oh.
Her body. Anybody want to tell us what happens?
Yeah, something happens to her.
Yeah, her belly becomes distended, and her, what's the proper word? Is it prolapsed?
Oh, her uterus collapses?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
prolapse.
I don't know if that's, I'm not, who am I to say whether that's better or worse, but it's not death.
No,
It's not good, but
it means that intercourse in the future is going to be painful for you.
it means that you're probably not going to, yes, you're not going to be able to have children again. But
You can have children if you have a prolapsed uterus.
yeah, that's true. Yes. But I think it could be that it was,
I mean, it depends on how
3000
violently.
BCE, you could have children with a prolapsed uterus?
Well, it depends on how prolapsed it is. I mean, if it's just hanging down a little into the.
I can't believe we're having
As
this.
opposed to-
I can't believe
Sorry
we're
being
having
gory
this
about this. It was
discussion.
raised by surgeon, you know?
So I
They
will
used
tell
to-
you this.
I used to have to edit this magazine that had pictures of people who were really in bad shape.
Eesh. How old were you?
Oh, I was 19, 20.
Oh, okay. So it's not like you were 10.
Not I was a kid, no.
It's not like 7, 8, or 9. Okay.
No, not like that.
So,
I thought that there was no legal way that Jewish law could kill people, but
okay. So
It made it really difficult.
yes, Reverend Lynn, you're 100% right that Judaism really tried to make it so that you couldn't, but you can in certain circumstances, right? Well, if all these witnesses saw it and if all the witnesses, the people warned them and everything else. So yes, the laws are on the books, but it's very, very difficult to actually do it. So, so the good news is that you're probably not going to be convicted of it, but the laws are on the books. So, there is also a penalty of drinking molten lead. Do people know that? Am I freaking people out by this? I mean, it's pretty freaky. But one of the punishments also is drinking molten lead, and it's a punishment for specifically idolatry. So there's also, it's burning from the inside. It's called srefa. It's not burning on the outside, which is the way they did it for witches and things like that, right? Where they burn them. That's actually not what it is. It is, it's burning from the inside out. I know that's horribly, disgusting to think about, but this was the ritual. These are things that you drink, punishment by drink, if you will. Of course, there's 3 other punishments, strangling, beheading, and stoning. But the drinking ones were sometimes fatal or whatever, capital punishment. And the other times, like in the case of sota, it wasn't going to kill you, but you would be, definitely not feel good afterwards.
sounds like early waterboarding.
We've never said that before, but yeah, why not? It does seem like
Well, it seems that with the drinking bit, there's an opportunity for chicanery of some kind.
what do you mean?
Well, I mean that they could have faked giving you the, if they wanted you to live, they could give you a fake,
Oh, yeah. Well, not for the one with
maybe not with the
idolatry.
lead, but
Yeah.
although, you know,
Now,
if they studied magic in Egypt, it's possible they did.
the rabbi, yeah, well, so the rabbis actually have a discussion about whether whether anyone was ever
Mm.
punished or anyone ever really got sick from the laws of Sota. They actually have a disagreement about it.
Ah.
So there's a real question of whether it was efficacious, is the word, right? And so the question really then became one of, the rabbis knew and admitted, and they of course did not do this. So after the time of the temple, you couldn't do this anymore. So this is somewhat theoretical for them, but they're basically saying, look, there was a way for husbands to move on and be able to
It
forgive their
could be a
wives.
way for the wife to clear her name.
Exactly. And so they really felt, the rabbis really did understand this and felt that this really was a way for, women to be reaccepted by their spouses. And that stain of adultery would be off of them. Look, I mean, I don't know what to tell you other than there are still cultures, and you know this, and so I don't need to get into it other than, you know, that there's still honor killings that go on in the world. Like, there were women that were murdered today for honor killings, because it happens so frequently that there's virtually not a day that it doesn't go by where there's a woman that's not murdered for an honor killing. So this might be a way of preserving life, and dealing with the fact that how were women protected in the ancient world? And if it's this voodoo ritual that you can laugh at today and kind of say, you know, whatever, that's so silly. Folks, there are people that maybe need to have this ritual just so they don't continue to kill women. I don't know what else to say other than this is real stuff, folks. This is not theoretical in its application, in the fact that there needs to be these kinds of things to some extent. We still live in a world where women are oftentimes victims of violence where they have no protection. There's nothing to protect them from this, not their families, not the courts, and not a system of justice. So I don't know, it's not so silly is what I want to say. So let's move on to what's Moses going to do.
Those who were executed by these judgments numbered 3,000. So that Moses said to God, O Lord of the world, just and merciful are you, and all your deeds are deeds of integrity. Shall 600,000 people, not to mention all those who are below 20 years of age and all the many proselytes and slaves, perish for the sake of 3,000 sinners? God could no longer withhold his mercy and determined to forgive Israel their sins. It was only after long and fervent prayers that Moses succeeded in quite propitiating God, and hardly had he returned from heaven when he again repaired thither to advance before God his intercession for Israel. He was ready to sacrifice himself for the sake of Israel, and as soon as punishment had been visited on the sinners, he turned to God with the words, O Lord of the world, I have now destroyed both the golden calf and its idolaters. What cause for ill feeling against Israel can now remain? The sins these committed came to pass because you have heaped gold and silver upon them, so that the blame is not wholly theirs. Yet now, if you will, forgive their sin, and if not, blot me, I pray you, out of your book which you have written.
So, this is the famous approach that we oftentimes take with, again, we go back to the parent analogy, but it's definitely something we've dealt with before, where we would point to the other parent and say, you created the situation because you enabled them, you spoiled them, So Moses says to God, you're the one who gave him all the treasures in the first place, right? You know, it's a very human thing to basically say, look, you know that you're part of the problem here, and obviously there's a certain level of I think the correct word is chutzpah here that Moses employs, but it is definitely understandable. And again, to some extent, we'd say, look, this is Moses behaving like the parent, and basically saying, yeah, God, you did this. You did this. I've done, and by the way, it's not just that, of course, right? I've punished them now. What more can we do? But there's a huge amount of chutzpah that goes into Moses saying this. It does not say this in the Torah. We showed it to you. It did not say this. All right.
These bold words of Moses were not without consequences for him. For although God thereupon replied, whosoever has sinned against me, him will I blot out of my blood. Still, it was on account of this that his name was omitted from one section of the Pentateuch. But for Israel, his words created an instant revulsion of feeling in God, who now addressed him kindly and promised he would send his angel who would lead the people into the promised land. These words indicated to Moses that God was not yet entirely appeased, and he could further see this in the punishment that fell upon Israel on that day. Their weapons, which every man among them had received at the revelation on Sinai, and which had miraculous virtues, having the name of God engraved upon them, were taken from them by the angels, and their robes of purple likewise. When Moses saw from this that God's wrath was still upon Israel, and that he desired to have nothing further to do with them, he removed his tent a mile away from the camp, saying to himself, the disciple may not have intercourse with people whom the master has excommunicated.
Wow. This is a weird one because it basically says, okay, so Moses knows that God is now okay, but he's still not, so he knows it's okay by the fact that God said, I'm going to send the angel. The angel will be there again. And I'm back, if you will. But Moses is not okay with the people. And so Moses kind of sees that God is okay in the sense that there's going to be, he's forgiven them, but Moses realizes that God also isn't quite okay still. And so that's why you have this understanding that Moses realizes that things are not going to ever go back to the way they were. And so he stays, according to this, a mile away from the camp. Which means I can't have the same relationship with the Israelites that I had before. We're not done with that theme yet.
Not only the people went out to this tent whenever they sought the Lord, but the angels also. The seraphim and the heavenly hosts repaired there, the sun, the moon, and the other heavenly bodies, all of whom knew that God was to be found there, and that the tent of Moses was the spot where they were to appear before their Creator. God, however, was not at all pleased to see Moses keep himself aloof from the people, and said to him, According to our agreement, I was to propitiate you every time you were angry with the people, and you were to propitiate me when my wrath was kindled against them. What is now to become of these poor people if we're both angry with them? Return, therefore, to the camp, to your people. But if you will not obey, remember that Joshua is in the camp at the sanctuary, and he can well fill your place. Moses replied, it is for your sake that I'm angry with them. And now I see that still you cannot forsake them. I have, said God, already told you that I shall send an angel before them. But Moses, by no means content with this assurance, continued to importune God not to entrust Israel to an angel, but to conduct and guide them in person.
So all of this comes back to this issue of, was the angel leading the people as God says now? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Moses seems to think that it means that God's not really going to be as involved. Even though God says, no, I'm there. I'm still here. I'm still going to be doing the miracles. But there really is a sense that Moses doesn't believe it. Moses doesn't believe God. And God has to talk him back into essentially, both of us can't be mad. One of us has to be the good cop. So you have to go back and be the good cop because both of us can't do it. There is a real sense that, like, maybe here's what the rabbis are really saying. If it wasn't for the golden calf, we read last week that maybe we would have lived forever, right? So God was willing to, like, do away with the angel of death for the Jewish people if we had followed the commandments for more than, well, a day or a couple of weeks, whatever. That, like, we already screwed up with that. We had a chance to really, really have an amazing life if we hadn't broken the commandments. But there's this other sense that the rabbis have to some extent, which is that things are never the same after this, that God maybe is not as involved with us as would have happened if we hadn't screwed up. There's no way to know because that's not the Torah we have basically says that, you know, God did miracles for us for the rest of the 40 years, but we never have another experience like Mount Sinai. We never have another experience when God's talking to us. And so there's a question like maybe we were supposed to. Maybe there was going to be a closer relationship with God. And that Moses recognizes that, and that's why we have what we have. That's an interesting little idea, right? The rabbis are essentially arguing from what's not there, which is difficult to do, but there's that feeling like maybe there would have been more moments like Mount Sinai if we hadn't screwed up. So anyways, so right now God is saying, you got to go back. You got to be there. And what does he tell him? If you don't, they've got Joshua. So you can abdicate responsibility here. You can still not wrap your head around this, but Joshua's there and he'll take care of them. Yep.
40 days and 40 nights from the 18th day of Tammuz to the 28th day of Av did Moses stay in heaven, beseeching and imploring God to restore Israel once more entirely into his favor. But all his prayers and exhortations were in vain, until at the end of 40 days, he implored God to set the pious deeds of the 3 patriarchs and of the 12 sons of Jacob to the account of their descendants. And only then was his prayer answered. He said, if you are angry with Israel because they transgressed the 10 commandments, be mindful for their sake of the 10 tests to which you subjected Abraham, and through which he nobly passed. If Israel deserves at your hands punishment by fire for their sin, remember the fire of the lime kiln into which Abraham let himself be cast for the glory of your name. If Israel deserves death by sword, remember the readiness with which Isaac laid down his neck upon the altar to be sacrificed to you. If they deserve punishment by exile, remember for their sake how their father Jacob wandered into exile from his paternal home to Haran. Moses, furthermore, said to God, will the dead ever be restored to life? God, in surprise, retorted, have you become a heretic, Moses, that you doubt the resurrection? If, said Moses, the dead never awaken to life, then truly you are right to wreak vengeance upon Israel. But if the dead are to be restored to life hereafter, what will you then say to the fathers of this nation if they ask you what has become of the promise you've made to them? I demand nothing more for Israel, Moses continued, than what you were willing to grant Abraham when he pleaded for Sodom. You were willing to let Sodom survive if there were only 10 just men therein. And I am now about to enumerate to you 10 just men among the Israelites: myself, Aaron, Eleazar, Itamar, Phinehas, Joshua, and Caleb. Well, that is only 7, objected God. Moses, not at all abashed, replied, but you have said that the dead will hereafter be restored to life, so count with these the 3 patriarchs to make the number 10 complete. Moses' mention of the names of the 3 patriarchs was of more avail than all else, and God granted his prayer, forgave Israel their transgression, and promised to lead the people in person.
Wow.
So why can't we count the patriarchs to make a minion?
I guess you could say that that's not something we can normally do, right? We don't have the ability to do that on a daily basis. And we're also not Moses. But also, again, you can make the argument that we're also not arguing for our lives right now, or normally. But the funny thing is that Moses, when he's confronted with, oh, you saved Sodom and Gomorrah, his argument is, you saved Sodom and Gomorrah for 10, you were willing to do it for 10 people. Back in Abraham's day, you were willing to do that. And so he starts listing people in his community of the 600,000 men.
He can find 10 out of 600.
7.
7.
He starts giving the list to Moses, to God, and God says, Moses, that's 7. You didn't get 10, right? You didn't even come up with 10. So, and by the way, this isn't yet the point where the tribes, we know later on that Joshua and Caleb are the only 2 good leaders, chieftains of the tribes that come back with a good report in numbers. That hasn't happened yet. Shalchacha is still a few months away, a year away, whatever. It is over a year away. But the people are the people. It's not like they're changing, right? They are what they are. But yeah, there's the rabbis kind of point out this funny thing that, like, well, what, by the way, I also should point out that Nadav and Avihu haven't been killed yet. So it's almost like, can't include them. And obviously the women aren't counted because you have Miriam in that group if you had. But again, of the 600,000 men that come out that are here, there's only 7 that he can come up with that we know are good enough to deserve, God's presence. And so again, it really does set up the rabbis to say Moses is going to throw out Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob because, yeah, they're dead, but they're not forgotten. And that to some extent, they will, if they're going to be resurrected, if they're going to come back, then they're not really gone. So it kind of like leads us to this idea that those who've died are not gone because they're only gone for the time being. They'll eventually come back. So therefore we can count them. So it's kind of a nice reminder that the dead, or at least the really righteous people, are never gone. And yeah, it's kind of nice. It's kind of a nice takeaway from that. Not everybody's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but the good that lived before are not, you know, are not gone. So that's not the end of this discussion about the fallout. This is the fallout from the golden calf. This is how do we move on after screwing up big time as a people, which of course then gets to like, how do we ever get forgiven for what we do? So we'll
Aliens have to come and scare us.
or God.
Yes.
Yeah. So the inscrutable ways of the Lord, that's a pretty heavy duty thing.
Moses still cherished 3 other wishes: that the Shekinah might dwell with Israel, that the Shekinah might not dwell with other nations, and lastly, that he might learn to know the ways of the Lord, whereby he ordained good and evil in the world, sometimes causing suffering to the just and letting the unjust enjoy happiness, whereas at other times both were happy or both were destined to suffer. Moses laid these wishes before God in the moment of his wrath. Hence God bade Moses wait until his wrath should have blown over, and then he granted him his first 2 wishes in full, but his third in part only. God showed him the great treasure troves in which are stored up the various rewards for the pious and the just, explaining each separated one to him in detail. In this one were the rewards of those who give alms, in that one of those who bring up orphans. In this way, he showed him the destination of each one of the treasures, until at length they came to one of gigantic size. For whom is this treasure? Asked Moses. And God answered, out of the treasures that I have shown you, I give rewards to those who have deserved them by their deeds. But out of this treasure do I give to those who are not deserving. For I am gracious to those who may also lay no claim to my graciousness, and I am bountiful to those who are not deserving of my bounty.
So now we get into the bigger issue, which is, okay, that's
Back to why do the innocent suffer?
yeah. So
And how do the guilty get away with it?
yeah. And so this is kind of strange, you know, that we take this off of the Mount Sinai golden calf incident, but it definitely leads to some bigger theological questions, which is what they have here. There's a real question. Why would Moses ask God at the worst possible time to answer these questions, right? But of course, there's this understanding that there's a delayed treasure for those people that do really good things. I mean, these are just some of the examples. People who give tzedakah, people who help bring up orphans. Well, those are 2 examples. I don't know. Those are 2 big ones. One of them seems to be pretty easy to do. The other one doesn't seem very easy to do. I don't know if they're examples of like the extremes, right? You know, yeah. So I don't know if those were the 2 reasons why those ones were picked. I mean, because essentially everyone can give tzedakah. Even someone who's poor can give tzedakah. You give a little bit, you know, and that's still good. So it's accessible for everybody. Raising orphans is not something that everybody can do. always
Well,
wondered.
aren't the rabbis just trying to encourage people? So they're saying, yeah, this is something that everyone can do. And then, oh, but this is the most special thing. And only some people can do it, but they get a
Yeah.
special reward, you know?
I would
I
tell
mean, they
you.
must have, I'm sure they had orphans in their community that needed support.
Yep. And I'm guessing that they recognize that. I'm thinking that they recognize that. So that's my take on it. I could be wrong. As someone who took on the mitzvah of raising an orphan, I can tell you that it is not an easy thing to do, and I didn't do it for that long. But it definitely seems like the highest mitzvah that somebody can do. And the person who did it ended up, if you don't get into heaven for that, then I don't know what. But the other issue is that essentially God says to Moses, there's a lot of people that are going to get stuff that maybe don't even deserve it that much, but everybody gets rewarded. So there is this weird kind of idea that it's because of God's goodness and God's forgiveness and God's, people get rewarded who don't deserve it to some extent. But well, let's keep going because this maybe gives a little bit better explanation. So what do you do with that information?
Moses now had to content himself with the certainty that the pious were sure of their deserts, without, however, learning from God how it sometimes comes to pass that evildoers too are happy. For God merely stated that he also shows himself kind to those who do not deserve it, but without further assigning the why and the wherefore. But the reward to the pious too was only in part revealed to him, for he beheld the joys of paradise of which they were to partake, but not the real reward that is to follow the feast in paradise. For truly, eye hath not seen beside the Lord what he has prepared for him that waits for him.
So Moses is not content because even though he knows that the pious should know that they're going to get rewarded, or the hope that they're going to be rewarded gives them comfort and makes them feel like it's all going to work out okay in the end. But then there's this question of what about the bad people who seem to be able to be pretty content, with this. So I mean, clearly, however you want to understand this, again, I know this is a midrash, and I know you can laugh at it and say it's kind of, but there's something really deep about this because it gets to the big questions of why, not only why do bad things happen to good people, but also why do good things happen to bad people, and why do people who do bad things, why do they seem to be okay? Why do they seem to be okay with it, right? And so they're content. That's the word that they use, right? Evildoers are happy. They're happy. So here's the lesson that the Midrash tells us. So this is kind of, again, like one of the really interesting Midrashim about Moses and God.
By means of the following incident, God showed Moses how little man is able to fathom the inscrutable ways of the Lord. When Moses was on Sinai, he saw from that station a man who betook himself to a river, stooped down to drink, lost his purse, and without noticing it, went on his way. Shortly after, another man came, found the money, pocketed it, and took to his heels. When the owner of the purse became aware of his loss, he returned to the river, where he did not find his money, but saw a man who came there by chance to fetch water. To him he said, restore to me the money that a little while ago I left here, for none can have taken it if not you. When the man declared that he had found none of the money nor seen any of it, the owner slew him. Looking with horror and amazement on this injustice on earth, Moses said to God, I beseech you, show me your ways. Why has this man who was quite innocent been slain? And why has the true thief gone unpunished? God replied, the man who found the money and kept it merely recovered his own possession, for he who had lost the purse by the river had formerly stolen it from him. But the one who seemed to be innocently slain is only making atonement for having at one time murdered the father of his slayer. In this way, God granted the request of Moses to show him his ways, in part only. He let him look into the future and let him see every generation and its sages, every generation and its prophets, every generation and its expounders of the scriptures, every generation and its leaders, every generation and its pious men. But when Moses said, O Lord of the world, let me see by what law you do govern the world, for I see that many a just man is lucky, but many a one is not. Many a wicked man is lucky, but many a one is not. Many a rich man is happy, but many a one is not. Many a poor man is happy, but many a one is not. Scroll, please.
Yep.
Then God answered, you cannot grasp all the principles which I apply to the government of the world, but some of them shall I impart to you. When I see human beings who have no claim to expectations from me, either for their own deeds or for those of their fathers, but who pray to me and implore me, then do I grant their prayers and give them what they require from subsistence.
So, there's a couple things that happen here, which is that, so God shows Moses a scene, right? That, you know, it appears that, you know, there's injustice. And of course, what does God explain to Moses? You're only seeing part of the story, right? What's interesting, of course, is that some of this goes back generationally, right? So some of the things that you don't see, Moses, is stuff that happened before, and I've got to balance it out. So you don't see the whole thing. That's the kind of the idea that we're being cursed by things that our ancestors did. Has anybody ever felt that before? Anybody?
But certainly suffering from mistakes of the people that went before us.
Yeah. There is that feeling, right? But of course, then there's this other like real, like, no, it's not just on a macro level that, you know.
I mean, if you're, I've always felt like if you're proud of the things that your ancestors, you know, did that were good, then you kind of got to be ashamed of the things that they did that were bad.
Yeah. And we feel that, I think, sometimes as Americans, specifically as Americans.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if people feel that way in the future about Israel. I mean, look, like when they look back, I mean, they do now. So it's probably safe to assume that they'll feel that way 100 years from now, God willing, if we're still here.
Aliens don't get us.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a sense that, you know, we have that in America, right? Are we paying for the sins of slavery, for example?
Manifest destiny.
And Native Americans. Are these things that we're being punished for? Mm-hmm. And so we say that on a macro level, but there's also this like, what if on a micro level, on a personal level, you and I get punished for something that our parent did like somebody a couple of generations ago really screwed up and there was never an accounting for it.
Well, it's like
So there's,
all the Greek tragedies about that.
yeah, but so there's one answer, which we already saw, which is that you get rewarded in the future, right? And so the recompense for the accounting, if you will, how you get it back on the balance sheet is that you get rewarded in the future, which is when you want to get rewarded, because everybody wants to work hard now and retire later. Well, not saying everybody, but there is that.
Then there's the, I just had the awful thought that maybe your reward was in the past. You already got it.
Yes. So that's the other possibility.
Yes.
The other possibility is that we are. The other possibility is that we are.
I mean, for God, he could bless your ancestors for something that you did.
Yeah, that's true. It could go the other way, right? If you're the guy who got enriched by this, this is a good one. You get paid forward, and you didn't even realize what was happening. Yeah, that would be good. You end up getting a reward. But in all fairness, I mean, there is this sense that, like, maybe there's stuff going on that we don't know about, right? There's stuff that's happening and we don't see it, but it is happening. And if it's stuff that we get paid for in the future, or if we're paying for it from the past, yeah, maybe there's maybe it will work out, if you will. Maybe it's going to, or maybe it has worked, or maybe it has worked out. So these are the things that we think about. These are things that people have always thought about. And there's that sense that essentially I would say is kind of the Job answer, which is we don't know. And that's what it says. You
Listen,
can't grasp.
you make the world.
Exactly. And you can't grasp all the things that I do. And, but I really like this idea of, I don't like it. No, that's not what I meant to say. I've thought about this issue. I have thought about that issue before. Like, maybe somebody screwed up a couple, every time something bad happens. So maybe one of my great grandparents did something I don't know about, and I'm paying the price right now. And the reason I say this is because obviously it's a very Jobian principle of, like, why does this happen? And God, this is the Job situation. And I don't know, by the way, whether the Coen brothers read this Midrash before they did A Serious Man, but A Serious Man, right, is their modern take on Job. And it's like, this guy has all these things happen to him and he doesn't know why it's happening. And his wife leaves him, and his kids are not in great shape, and it's not good, right? It's a great movie. Very, very Minnesota movie, by the way. It's the most Minnesota movie they ever made, about their own kind of childhood. And it's very Jewish, but it's very Jobian. It's Job. It's basically their version of Job. It's three friends or three rabbis. I mean, it's all there. But there's a pre-movie, there's a movie that kind of happens before the movie with Five-ish Finkel's in it. He's probably the more well-known actor who was in that little 5-minute pre-movie where there's like a stabbing that happens and you're not really sure what happens, and like why the movie's there. But kind of like the theory of, I don't know if the Coen brothers have ever really addressed it, but the theory is that kind of explains why this guy's getting punished, maybe, is that he's dealing with a curse on his family. Okay, so it's kind of an interesting idea that there's multi-generational curses, I guess is the right word, multi-generational curses. And so the curse that happens here is the curse that happens here in some cases, Moses doesn't know. And again, I don't, like I said, I don't know that I don't know that they were thinking of this at the time that they made when do we eat, like if they knew this midrash in particular, but it is a really Jobian situation. So I do want to give you that
That certainly
possibility.
plays around with other notions like free will and your personal agency and so forth.
Yep. And don't we kind of like wonder whether or not like are these things that we can figure out, or and if we could figure it out, are we only seeing part of the, are we only seeing part of the picture? And I don't know. I think that
There's a confession that we use that talks about our personal prayer, but also our personal sin, but also our collective sin, things done on our behalf. Sort of white privilege certainly falls into that, and among other things.
I
Perhaps
assume it's an old prayer.
Yes. Well, no, it's a modern prayer.
Oh, because we have
Things done and things done on our behalf.
because we have this kind of prayer we do at Yom Kippur, where we say sins that we've done intentionally and unintentionally, with our knowledge, without our
We
knowledge.
have that. That's old.
Yeah. So
I'm sort of drawn to the notion of things, sin done on my behalf, that
yeah.
I'm
Yep.
quietly accept.
Yeah. I think that
All those people who arranged things so their kids could go to college.
oh yeah. By the way, did you see that thing on Netflix? By the way, did you see that the documentary / live action thing that they did? It was pretty good.
No,
It was really good. It was only one episode. It was only 2 hours. Yeah, it was Matthew Modine played the guy, Rick, whatever his name was. But then they interviewed the people, they interviewed the FBI people that worked on it. So it was documentary, but with acted out pieces. I don't call that. Anyways, it was really interesting though, because they played the phone conversations of
Docudrama, isn't it?
yeah, is it a docudrama? I don't know. But anyways, it's part real. Anyways, but they talked to the FBI agents, and I don't remember if they talked to if any of the people who actually got convicted or pled were interviewed. I can't remember. I don't think so. But what was interesting is that all the parents that they play the tapes of all said the same thing. I don't want my kids to know. It was really interesting that was like a big thing for them, is they didn't want their children to know that they had done this. And so there is that weird thing about like when people do something wrong, even on our behalf, that we may not know it because they didn't want us to know it. I mean, that's assuming that they knew what they were doing was wrong. In this case, these people flat out knew what they were doing was wrong. But it does kind of like, the manifest destiny example that we were using, or the slavery example. I mean, clearly the people who were engaged in this didn't think they were wrong in doing it. That's the weird thing, is that, like we used to say, how could they not have been known that they were like, they feel guilty about it? At least from what we know.
They were really sins against their children.
Yes.
They were sinning against their children. They didn't allow their children to have any integrity, or they had no faith in their children, or you could just, the list goes on and on.
And that's what they were so worried about, was that they were doing this for their kids, but they didn't realize, of course, that, the real consequences to it, because all they cared about was the college, and they didn't think about the integrity and the values that they're actually teaching their kids. Or maybe, again, just as long as nobody knew, that's all they cared about. So it's a really interesting kind of like ethical dilemma of when people know what they're doing is wrong, and sometimes they don't, and they don't think it's wrong, and so they're not hiding it. I mean, people who own slaves didn't hide it. They weren't telling their kids, "Oh, this is all wrong," but we're doing it anyways. So it's a little different. But this issue of when we do know that what we're doing is wrong, trying to get away with it, and I think that's pretty much what the Midrash is talking about. They're talking about people that are knowing that they're doing wrong and trying to get away with it. And then God, kind of fixes these things. Or let's finish this one little piece here too about this, which again, it wasn't necessarily what you thought was going to be in this Midrash, because like why is it here? But again, I guess where it was originally in the Midrash was there was this scene that Moses and God have the big question, if you will. All right.
Although God had now granted all of his wishes, still Moses received the following answer to his prayer: I beseech you, show me your glory. You may not behold my glory, or else you would perish. But in consideration of my vow to grant you all your wishes, and in view of the fact that you are in possession of the secret of my name, I will meet you so far as to satisfy your desire in part. Lift the opening of the cave, and I will bid all the angels that serve me pass in review before you. But as soon as you hear the name which I have revealed to you, know then that I am there, and bear yourself bravely and without fear. God has a reason for not showing his glory to Moses. He said to him, when I revealed myself to you in the burning bush, you did not want to look upon me. Now you are willing, but I am not.
Wow. Playing hard to get. I mean, you could also make the argument that Moses here is asking to see God in a way that he didn't expect to do that. By the way, what are we talking about here? Let me just show you one thing in the Torah, which is why we have this midrash about God's nature right now. After this scene of punishment, let's go a little bit further.
Let me behold your presence. You just saw it past it.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you.
There it is.
Yeah. And the Lord said, oh, where is this? This is the scene we talked about before. Unless you leave, I will not leave this. Don't let us go on unless you're doing it. I will do this thing, right? I will lead them myself. And then Moses says in verse 18, let me behold your presence. And he answered, I'll make my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you the name of the Lord and the grace that I grant and the compassion that I show. But he said, you cannot see my face, or you may not see me and live. And the Lord said, see in that place near me, station yourself on that rock. And as my presence passes by, I'll put you in the cleft of the rock and shield you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take my hand away and you'll see my back, and my face must not be seen. And trust me, in the next thing, it goes back to the tablets in the second set. So this scene here of God, of Moses asking God to see his presence, the rabbis infer from this that Moses, wanted to see God, wanted to get to see God more. And God, of course, says, I gave you a chance to see me before and you didn't want to see me. So now I'm not going to show you myself. That's kind of like God saying, you missed your chance, which is kind of weird. It's a weird way of explaining it, but it kind of is an answer. There's the other answer, which is that no, Moses is asking to see a dimension of God here that God will not let him see, can't let him see, ever let him see. The Torah seems to say that, which is you can't see my face. It's too much for you. And what you saw at Burning Bush was, you could make the argument, it was just like not even any of that. It's God it's God's miracle. It's like a piece of God. So now Moses is asking to see something else. But what the rabbis infer on another level is that Moses wants to understand God and why God does what God does. And so that last section that we just wrote, the inscrutable nature of God, isn't that Moses wants to see God's face, but Moses wants to know why God does what God does. And it's that makes Moses frustrated, which is, I'm not going to know this? And God says, you can't. So the seeing me isn't really seeing God. It's understanding God. It's actually being able to comprehend why God does what God does. And it's that essentially God says, it's going to blow your mind. You can't.
In verse 23, is that a good translation? Then I will take my hand away and you will see my back. Does he really mean back? I mean, isn't it more than his back?
The word is, it could definitely not be translated that way. The problem is that words that are used here are panai, which is face, and achurai, which is the back. So the face is the front, the achurai is the other side. So one could say not necessarily the face and God's butt, you can see my butt.
The B side.
It's not, it's more of the other side.
I read something recently,
but
that was a better translation but I'll let you see my butt.
Yeah, it is a possibility. It's not,
Which I thought was curious and interesting.
It is the whole side of the body. It's not literally your back from your, butt upwards. It's the whole backside. And so the interesting thing here is, again, I think the interpretation from how people got to here was that it's not the front. It's not the front of God. Panai definitely could be the front, can be the face of something, which is not just the face. It's the front side. It's the side that you see. Like Rosemary said, the B side is the other side. And so
it's also, isn't that kind of a slap at Moses? I mean,
yeah, but in reality, he says, you cannot see my face, for a man may not see me and live. So he's telling him, and that's the same word, at the front of me. You cannot see the front of me and survive. You could see the back of me, which is, again, assumedly the dark side. That's the other way to look at it, the dark side. You can see the dark side of me, but you can't see the light side of me. You can't see the side from the front will be overwhelming, because it says you can't, it literally says you can't live. It says hadam v'chai. You can't, any man can't see me. It's not just you, human beings. Hadam is humanity. Humanity may not see me and live. So it's just not possible for humans to take in my glory in fullness in the front side. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting scene of Moses, of Moses being literally like put into the rock so that he, and again, the word here that's used here is kapi, is my hand. And so Moses is literally told, I'm going to shield you with my hand. So you even if you wanted to see me, you're not going to be able to see me. You're covered up. So it's a pretty wild scene. It's definitely, look, in the next scene, we're going to actually pick up next week. We're actually going to be looking at that moment in a little greater detail. So this is where we're going to pick up next week, as the place where God is seen, or let's put it this way, the way human beings, the only way that a human being's ever seen that much of God, And then again, we're going to read about the second set of the second set of the Ten Commandments. All right, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Keep praying for peace. Keep thinking, again, doing what we have to do to not lose hope. And hope everybody stays safe and enjoys the days after Shavuot. We're now in the in the Orthodox world, Shavuot is still being celebrated today, so we can say Chag Sameach. But also, again, when we're out of the period of the Omer, which we're out of now, we can start having weddings traditionally. I mean, we have weddings during the Omer period, but Orthodox Jews don't have celebrations during the Omer period. So it is a serious period of reflection, and now we're back. We're supposed to kind of be back into the summer. So everybody take care.
And see you tomorrow night.
We'll see you tomorrow night on Wednesday night. Thanks, everybody. Stay